I do believe that franchising, when it's done right from the company standpoint, can be extremely powerful. Certainly it's not right for everyone, but for a lot of companies, it can be.
Welcome to Give a Heck. I am your host, Dwight Heck, and for much of my life, lived my life in quiet desperation, wondering how I was going to pay the bills, take vacations, save for retirement, and one day wondering if I would get off the hamster wheel of life and have purpose. A life that most of society lives, which takes us to work, then home, then repeat, and pays us hopefully enough just to survive. The harsh truth that most live with more month than money and have no idea how to live life on purpose, not by accident. This ensures the mass majority are living not just financially broke, however emotionally and mentally as well due to financial pressures. In each episode, I will introduce you to thoughts, ideas, and guests that can help you to learn how you too can live life on purpose, not by accident.
Good day and welcome to Give a Heck. On today's show, I welcome Jon Ostenson. Jon is a top 1% national franchise broker, investor, author, and international speaker specializing in the area he has coined as non-food franchising. Has served as the president of Inc. 500 franchise system, and now as a multi-brand franchisee himself, Jon is uniquely positioned to educate others on franchising and franchise selection. Jon serves as the CEO of FanBridge Consulting and has helped thousands of entrepreneurs and investors explore business ownership and investment opportunities. Jon is the author of the book on non-food franchising and is a frequent contributor and thought leader for publications on the topic of franchising and franchise investments. Prior to FanBridge, Jon was the president of Shelf Genie, a national franchise system with 200 plus locations. I'd like to welcome you to the show, Jon. Thanks so much for agreeing to come on and share with us some of your life journey.
Excited to be here, Dwight. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, me too. I've always been fascinated with franchises, and I've been around them pretty much my whole life, from even in my own financial planning practice, dealing with clients that want to get into franchises, that have got into franchises, have gone out of franchising, and people are so confused about franchising. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, like so many industries, I mean, we've got 3,500 franchise companies in North America, and there are good players and there are ones you wouldn't want to align with. And I think every industry is that way, right? And so, I think franchising, when done right, can provide such a better path to business ownership for so many out there. And, that's where I love stepping in and helping people understand, what I've come to learn over the years around how to navigate the franchise world and how to make it work for you.
Yeah, it really comes down to knowledge. It comes down to information, but it also involves the fact of an individual and those that are surrounding them for them to interpret the information, to see the value in it. Lack of experience, lack of knowledge, ignorance is pretty much the reason why I've seen a lot of businesses fail. Small businesses that have, brick and mortar, to people trying to get into franchising, even to good franchise operations. They just don't have the intellect. And it's not that they can't learn it. They just choose not to, or their environment has made it so that they can't learn it. And it may sound harsh, but I've seen it time and time again. What has been your experience in regards to people's thought processes and getting into franchising?
Yeah, so many reach out to me. I've got a background. I spent many years in the corporate world, and so many of our clients, have also, worked for others for most of their life and have that desire to step into business ownership. But oftentimes they don't know how to connect the dots. They don't know what industry or what their strengths are necessarily from a business ownership standpoint. They've always lived in the silos of a large corporation. And what I find, business ownership is not right for everyone, but for so many that are sitting on the sidelines, it can be right for them. And they've got that inner entrepreneur that they want to let loose. And again, where we step in is helping them understand franchising can be a path to do that by aligning with a strong franchisor on the sideline that is supporting you. So you're in business for yourself, but not by yourself, to be a little cliche on you. And we love the idea of, it's been my experience too as a franchisee. you've got a community of others that are living the same thing day in, day out as you, running the same business in their local markets. And so again, you've got a community where you're exchanging best practices and learning from others, sometimes learning from their mistakes, so that you can try to shortcut success for yourself.
Yeah, it's a lot of, in a traditional brick and mortar situation, the guy that's up the street from you, they're both mechanics. You aren't supporting one another. You're not going to give each other information, in most circumstances, because you're afraid you're going to steal each other's client. And when in reality, one service is more specialized in, let's say, a GM, and another person specializes in bauble, right? Completely different beasts in how they're structured. Yes, there's consistencies and similarities, but there's differences. So I like the idea of the franchise model. But what I want to do before we get too far into discussing franchises is understand some more about your origin story. I find it's very important for the people that listen to my show over the last 4 years. They really connect with the guests better when they know a little bit about your origin, not necessarily from the time you hit high school on, but really, what was your childhood like? Did you have siblings? Was it a struggle? Did you have any epiphanies when you were growing up that directed you and led you throughout your life, where you've had those aha moments? Wow, that was from my childhood. Could you please share anything you feel comfortable with about your origin, please?
Yeah, grew up in Atlanta, Georgia, was blessed to have a great family, two parents that, led us well. I was the oldest of four kids. My father was an estate planning attorney. I always joked that my father was going to have a big old mansion in heaven one day because he did so much pro bono work for so many widows and others in the community, and just a great man. But, he was never a marketing guy. He wasn't a sales and marketing guy, and he never built that practice. And, it's expensive to raise four kids. And so the conversations in our household around money were the types of conversations that I kind of made a pact to myself early on. I'm going to have different money conversations with my family down the line, because they're always trying to scrimp and save. I wanted to, in my young mind, one day be in a position where we're talking more about investing and being able to give back, and, just healthier conversations that provided for less stress. And so I'd say that was a driver of mine from my childhood. And it's been neat now and to be able to bless my parents by, helping them some ways financially. My other siblings have come alongside them as well. So a great legacy was left, but, there are things that I took from that I want to replicate, and things I don't want to replicate. So yeah, fast forwarding, got very involved throughout college and in different leadership aspects, at a large university, University of Georgia, stepped out and, worked for several very large public companies. Had the opportunity to work in India for 6 months very early in my career, which, helped me just develop a larger perspective. Worked for Carter's Oshkosh B'gosh, which is a large public company, for the president of that company. So really got to see how executive teams worked. And so I've been very blessed to have had different experiences, but just kind of fast forward, like so many of your listeners, I spent many years in the corporate world working to build someone else's empire. And I had that desire to build my own. And so it was about 8 years ago, mid-30s, where I stepped out and stepped into a private company, had the opportunity to serve as president of Shelf Genie franchise system and support owners all across the U.S. and Canada, and really fell in love with the franchise model, which kind of fast forward, I can get into more detail, but brings us to where we are today.
Well, that's fantastic. Dialing it back to the beginning of your origin and our parents introducing us or not introducing us to certain things in life. As you mentioned, you wanted to have the more open conversation about investing and just life with your own family. I seen that myself. My dad was a hard worker. A lot of our, earlier generations showed people how to work hard, but they didn't necessarily share the details about where they were financially, where they were even just being vulnerable emotionally and stuff. And they teach us to be protective. And then we go on to the next generation. We do the same thing. We act that way within our work structures, our personal school structures, and the way we communicate with people. We're more sheltered. So I find that the younger generations, even your generation, are more vulnerable and open to sharing whatever detail and just discussing it and not making it a tense situation. Oh, we can't afford to do this right now. I'm sorry, we have these financial concerns, or, again, always age appropriate conversations for those listening or watching. You're not going to dump all over your kids. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying the more open and honest you are to your children as you grow up, the better off you are, right? It's not just hard work ethic you need to teach your kids, like, keep your nose clean, go work hard, bum up, nose down to the grindstone. You have to actually teach your children how to communicate. And that starts by you communicating with them. So I appreciate you talking about that, and about how the fact you're supporting your own family, like your parents and your other siblings are stepping up to the plate. And that's honorable, right? We weren't put on this planet to be born alone or die alone, right? Or to suffer and not have the necessities in life. I'm not saying extraordinary stuff for our loved ones, but enough so that they're comfortable, because they give us life. They give us the knowledge we have that allowed us to springboard past them, or at least stay at a level of them. Maybe they're somebody that really you admire for what their work ethic. It sounds like you admired your dad a lot, though, regardless of whether or not he was a marketing genius.
Yeah, no, it's the qualities like the integrity and his, how well people respected him and his reputation, things that you choose to take and try to apply, to your own life for sure. So.
Yeah, I love that. That's fantastic. I know my dad, like I mentioned before we hit record, grew up in a small community. My dad, still today, he's in his 80s, alive, and we'll be in the local community of 20,000 people, and people will stop him on the street, and he still remembers people's names. And because he was a very successful business owner in the farm community, in the farm implementation dealership, but he was very integral in the community. And people this many years later, even younger people in their 20s will come up, oh, you remember come and see you, or we seen you at wherever with our parents, and you were so nice, and good to see you, Ray. And you know what I mean? That's life. That's connection. That's community. So that's fantastic. I appreciate you sharing that. So, Jon, so many people in my life, whether franchising good or bad, as I mentioned earlier, I've had so many people involved, right? Everybody's got an opinion, whether that's an educated opinion or not. It's hard to say. Sometimes they say they're educated, but really they're not. I have come to the conclusion, as I mentioned earlier, that really it involves lack of knowledge. And sometimes it's lack of ability to have that knowledge. As you mentioned, some people just aren't designed to have a business. And I find a lot of it has to do with personality. It can be how they grew up, their origin story. They're just not willing to put in the effort. They want the result, but they're not willing to put in the effort. And a lot of them, if I look at their current careers or jobs, you can see the patterns of how they're going to struggle to be a business owner, whether it's franchisee or traditional brick and mortar. Do you find that there's a correlation at all between somebody's personality and ability to run a business?
I absolutely do. And, I think a good analogy there, it would be, one constituency that we serve are existing business owners. They come to us, they're ready for their next rodeo, and they're thinking, do I start another business myself, or do I start a franchise? And oftentimes they like the idea of a franchise, but once we start talking and their personality comes out and I see where they're coming from, many of them I have to say, you're too entrepreneurial. These are folks that think they're the smartest guy in the room, no matter what room they're in, and they're going to have opinions on how everything should be done. But it's interesting in turn, Dwight, that quite a few of them say, hey, I remember all the work that went into starting a business from scratch. And, I love the idea now that, to be cliche, I can start on third base. A lot of things have already been proven out. And, I'm not in business all by myself, but I've got a franchisor on the sidelines supporting me. I've got a community of other franchisees living the same thing. Systems are in place, and, tech stacks and, vendors. And so they love the idea of being able to step into that. And so what I found is it's two very different personalities, just to use kind of that analogy there. And there are others that, I think fear drives them. And, if we all have some fear, right? And, oftentimes you do see that, people don't want to start a company on their own. They like the idea of franchising because some fear is holding them from starting a company on their own. I think in some cases, maybe there's too much fear. They're not going to be willing to spend on marketing. They're not going to be willing to step out there and take risk, even in the franchise environment. Whereas others say, hey, I'm going to trust the franchisor. I'm going to humble myself and step into a proven process where it's worked in this market and this market and this market and this market. And I'm going to trust that if I follow checklist in the process and take their coaching, that I'm going to have that same degree of success. So you really do see a lot of personality traits come out. I think about it's just like other asset classes. Crypto. You had early adopters on crypto, and you had those that stayed on the sideline, and obviously those that adopted it. Whether or not they had the knowledge, they've made out pretty well over time if they've held on to it. But you probably had some that jumped in and then jumped out. And so I think it's really fascinating. You probably saw that with your financial background too. Even the stock market, you're kind of rolling the dice a little bit. A lot of good people that we work with like the idea of franchising and that in business ownership, because they do have some say in the outcome ultimately. If they work hard, or if they make intelligent decisions, or if they hire the right people. Again, it's not passive. There's going to be some degree of involvement, even if you put a manager in place. And so kind of circling back to your question, you do see a lot of personality traits impacting whether they move forward with a franchise, as well as their degree of success once they're in business.
Yeah, it's when you were talking about that, one of the things that popped into my mind is the founder and Ray Kroc, and him setting up, like, whether or not people understand movies are movies, they're theatrical for a reason, it's entertainment. There's a lot of truth to that movie. I've read many books about Ray Kroc, and he had to struggle. It directly relates to what we're talking about with franchisees. He had franchisees that were opening up, but introducing other things that weren't consistent with the model of what he was trying to achieve. And they knew it all. They were the smartest person in the room. They were a mom and pop that, mortgaged their house to get into the franchise to begin with, didn't have a clue, but still thought it was cool to sell chocolate chip cookies or whatever example you want. So for those that are watching or listening, if you want a good indication of what Jon and I are communicating about, I don't know what Jon thinks of. I've seen the movie many times. I don't know. There's just something about it. I tend to watch The Founder. I think I've watched it 8 times. I actually bought it when it came out. And there's just things that I learned about it. Just the mindset, whether or not the writers did a good job, in my opinion. They're fairly accurate as to look at the McDonald brothers. They weren't willing to step out and grow. They were stuck in a rut. They weren't into marketing. They weren't, you know what I mean? And you just had a visionary like Ray Kroc, whether you like him or not. It was pretty amazing. So I appreciate you sharing that. So when you have people that are into franchising, there's obviously the non-food, and then there's the food. Why is there a difference, and why is non-food, in your opinion, a clear winner when it comes to franchising?
Yeah, certainly some people can do very well with food, and I support the food guys. We need them. I've got nothing against them. But a couple of thoughts. So first, when I say the F word, franchise, most people think fast food, right? They automatically go to QSR, fast food. And so I like the idea of being contrarian and saying, hey, what about that other half of the market that are all these other opportunities that are never top of mind for people, because they think fast food, they think hotels, they think oil changes, in some cases, but it's like there's all these other opportunities. So part of it was to be contrarian, but no, it's my humble belief based on what I've seen, based on my background and my clients, that there's simply easier ways to make money. Again, you can do very well with a large food, McDonald's or what have you, but there's so many food opportunities out there that I don't believe in. And in most of those cases, you're investing large amounts of capital, with a lot of employees, long operating hours. Oftentimes your margins are fairly low, and you're also susceptible to consumer whims. I think about frozen yogurt. Froyo was big until it wasn't, right? And so I think consumer whims and tastes change more in food than they do in other industries. Oftentimes, people will always spend on their kids. They'll spend on their pets. They'll spend on, their aging parents. They'll spend on their health. To some degrees, they'll spend on their homes. And so categories of business that support some of these other areas that, in some cases are more needs-based, in some cases more discretionary, but categories that are understandable, that aren't going to go out of style. Again, within food, there's just this large world of, good opportunities, but then also opportunities that you'd be putting a lot of money in and kind of rolling the dice a little too much. So that's how I think about it. And most of our clients, I'd say probably 95% of them like the idea of these other industries that we focus on, more so than the food space.
Yeah, I know quite a few people that have food franchises like Subway, for an example. I have a close first cousin that owns a couple of them, and the amount of hours that they work. And I've sat down with people that have reached out to me that are clients, sometimes people that have just heard that they can sit down and have I don't charge for them, just have a conversation and figure out the facts of their life. What direction are they? Some people are designed to be worker bees. Some people are designed to be the queen. And it's the reality of life. It's not meant to be harsh. And they'll go to, and I look at what he used to do in the energy and oil industry and what he made and what he accomplishes now from one location of Subway to the second location. I think he's opened a third now. And the amount of hours he works and going back and forth. And again, it's not that the franchise is bad, but if you want to make more money, you don't hire that manager. You don't hire that extra staff. Guess who's the manager and extra staff? Guess who's doing paperwork at home after the store is closed? Guess who's stressed out if somebody's sick? And again, it's not negative about normal business or any franchise, but a lot of people, when I tell them this stuff, it's like a light bulb sometimes goes on, not all the time. They just don't understand that they're buying themselves a job initially. Wouldn't you agree that it takes time, even for a brand new franchisee with a proven book? They open up and there's all the rules and this. They're still stepping into unknown territory. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, I'd say in probably a little more than half of the cases, our clients will step in and run the business, so it would feel like a job early on, usually with the goal of replacing themselves over time. The other half put a manager in place day one. Now, in franchising, that's very common, semi-absentee, semi-passive executive model. I prefer to call it semi-involved because even if you do that, you're still going to be involved, right? This isn't a passive investment. If it was easy, everybody would be a business owner, right? But with franchising, if you have a strong franchisor on the sideline, it does make that model doable in that they can carry the support water for that manager on a day-to-day basis. They can be the go-to for questions, so it doesn't all come to you. End of the day, you're still going to be involved. You're still going to be coaching the person, right? But it can take some of that off your plate and make it doable. Now, what is that contingent on? It's contingent on, one, having a good franchisor on the sideline, and two, as important, is having a good manager in place. And, if you don't have a good manager that's incentivized, that's a go-getter, and it's not the right fit, you're going to have some headaches. You're going to have to lean in. You're going to have to put in the time like you were just saying. However, I've got so many client case studies of where they found the right manager. They incentivize them. Oftentimes it's a young guy that's hungry, that's, gotten some experience before this, but he's ready to get out there. You give him a title, you give him a strong incentive plan, and he runs a business better than you would. So it can be done, but it just comes down, just like business 101, it comes down to the people. You've got to have a good operator day to day. You've got to have a good support system on the sideline. And if you have two of those things, they can take the burden off of you, but you'll still be involved somewhat.
Oh yeah, there has to be. I keep on seeing the word in my mind's eye: communication. Communication's key, because I guess the numbers would be hard. So you have 50% that make it right away with a manager, and 50% that dive into it themselves. It's just like any interview. It's understanding, asking the right questions of them asking good questions back. And then it's still a crapshoot because if you're hiring the young person, like you talk about, that's hungry, they don't really have a long resume. They don't have a lot that you can tap into to see or to analyze their circumstances. So you take a shot. But yeah, I've always wondered how many people actually jumped into it right away with a manager. Anybody I know that's gotten into franchises quit their job and they're in there down and dirty, 80 hours, 100 hours a week, just to protect their investment. And they're hungry, but at least they're learning. And then there's some that are hungry, they're in there, but they're not learning. And they realize within 90 days, 120 days that they bought themselves crazy. It's not even because it is. If like you said, if it was easy, everybody would do it. Right. So I just wish people would realize more what franchising is. And I have lots of conversations with people about what franchising can and cannot be. One of the things that I wanted to talk about too is I have a friend that very successful medical chain in in and around our province of Alberta. For those that are Americans, province is the same as a state. We just have a little bit more land mass than most of the states in the U.S. But he decided, and he's a good friend of mine, opened up, this is probably 15, 16 years ago, maybe a little bit longer, opened up one location. By his third location, he looked at franchising. We had conversations. And the next thing I know, he said, no, I don't like the franchising model. I'm going to lose control. I'd rather just open up every single one of them to a point now that he has like 13 locations. And he's going to expand across Canada, and it's not franchise based. And I look at his life and him flying around, jet setting everywhere, trying to open these locations and he may hire a manager like you're talking about with franchising, but he's very picky about what goes on in his life. And you look at him and he doesn't look like he's in his early 40s. He looks weathered and old. And I think that it would have been better for him to go to the franchise system. But, a person convinced against their will is of the same opinion still. In a circumstance like that, wouldn't franchising, as I mentioned him, be much more sensible? Wouldn't he take away more out of his life, not just time-wise, but profit-wise, as opposed to running a brick and mortar and chasing around to 13 locations, some of them 3-4 hours apart?
Probably so in that scenario. And a couple of thoughts there. In province X down the road, you can hire a manager. That manager is never going to be as incentivized as the guy with the skin in the game, right? So if it's a franchisee that knows their local market, they have relationships. Maybe there's a network there that they can tap into. But because they've made an investment, they put skin in the game, they're going to be more driven to make that successful, right? So I do think it would take some of it off his plate. I do see some companies will jump into franchising too early. Maybe they're not well capitalized. Maybe they haven't really baked the model all the way and open up additional locations. So, it can be a con, but I think for a lot of companies out there, and I've helped some companies do this, to get into franchising, a couple of benefits. It does allow you to scale potentially faster, right? Because, others are funding it rather than you having to fund it yourself or get debt on it. And, you're going to have people that are highly incentivized. And, when you think about down the road, private equity loves franchising, absolutely loves franchising. And they primarily invest at the franchisor level. Sometimes they'll buy up a large swath of franchisees. But I get so many calls from private equity firms. Hey, John, what are you seeing out there? Who are you liking? Any introductions you can make? And what I've seen is it's been strategic capital. They'll come in, oftentimes have a platform of several brands, and they're able to, create some synergies and economies of scale within that to, better fund franchisees. They bring capital to the table. But for that founder, like your friend, it can oftentimes be a higher multiple that he would be able to get if it had that franchise banner around it. Because again, private equity loves franchising. So I do think in that case, it sounds like maybe he would have benefited from a work-life standpoint. I mean, if you franchise too soon, all of a sudden you've got kids all across Canada that, have expectations of you. And that, if you're not fulfilling their expectations that you set, then that can be a big headache. But if you set the right expectations early on and then you build up a strong support team, it's very doable. I mean, there's countless case studies out there. So, I do believe that franchising, when it's done right from the company standpoint, can be extremely powerful. Certainly it's not right for everyone, but for a lot of companies, it can be.
Yeah, I'm thinking of the fact of, like you talked about Froyo and the food-based ones, their structure must have been sound of how they were operating, but then it was more of a fad or, like I think of another one. I actually know the founder of it. I've met him and visited with him, of Everbowl. And I look how they've expanded with their franchise out of a box thought process, right? And I wonder to myself, and I haven't talked to him in a long time. It's been probably 2 years. I wonder myself, how long is that fad gonna go? You know what I mean? Like we're back to that non-food versus food versus that support network. And if you have a solid franchisee operator or the head company that's running the franchise, is there a possibility that they make mistakes in looking at what's the de facto standard for sales today? What's going on what is the pulse on the railroad track of life right now? What's the fad? Do they design franchises sometimes knowing that they're only going to last 10, 15 years, or is it they're always their goal for it to last forever? Like, I know that you talk about equity investment. I know also know equity investment can sometimes buy losses, right? Buy something that they know is eventually going to be something to offset their principles of taxation and expenses.
Yeah, I'd say the only one that comes to mind is the idea that, oil changes in California may not be the best investment, right? Because of the
Electric.
EV, right? EVs coming.
Get it.
Now, that being said, in the US, they're rolling back some of those EV mandates. So we'll see. But you'll always need tire companies, right? Just to use the automotive example. Or, I think of some of the ones that we've had a lot of clients getting involved in recently: youth soccer, trampoline parks, pet grooming, dog training,
back to the family and animals. Yeah.
In-home senior care, companies that will build wheelchair ramps and stair lifts and bathroom mobility solutions so people can age in place. Businesses and home and property services. I mean, I'm invested in a business that does in Minneapolis that does paving and line striping, like for parking lots. I mean, that's not going to go out of style. Another business I'm invested in is temporary walls around, like containment walls around renovation and construction sites. There's always going to be a need for those, right? Restoration, water mitigation, mold remediation, cleanup. Again, we like those
sensible businesses. Yeah, sensible businesses that you're looking forward and projecting as to what's going on with the aging population, from the boomers, right? The Octarians that died a lot of them have passed away, still alive. Their kids, my generation, the millennials, the list goes on. So you're saying if you're going to franchise or create a franchise or get into it, make sure it's got a long-term longevity, and it's tied around, because you mentioned that earlier, around family, around estate planning, around keeping people in place. I love that. I love that response of people coming to build a ramp so you can stay at home, because I work with clients all the time to make it so that they're not in a long-term care facility. They age better, they're healthier, they're happier. And all you needed was a few modifications. And if there's a franchisee or a company that does it, that's fantastic. It's tied right to the heart.
In one other category, I'd say beauty. There are different ones within beauty. You might say, "Oh, that's a fad," or that one's got staying power. But an area that we really like is health and wellness. I mean, that's never been more top of mind. I just don't see that going away. I don't think health and wellness is ever going to be a fad. Certainly you've got fitness within there, but you've got a lot of recovery services. I'd say those are a little more fashion forward, a little more sexy, maybe than some other ideas. But the one that surprised me this past year, and we had a number of clients get in and do really well with this. It's sold out in the US. It's just about sold out in Canada. It's a business that does men's testosterone injections. It's Men's Health, but TRT, testosterone replacement, would be the big service. I mean, that's certainly come to prominence in recent years, right? I mean, that's become like very mainstream, and maybe that'll change. But the thing is, once people start doing it, they really can't stop doing it. And so does create a recurring revenue type service, for the owners. So that's one that was wildly popular, that I would say is a little more sexy than some others out there.
Well, residual income, most people don't understand. For those listening or watching, a cell phone company is residual income. A cable company, residual income. I don't know if they're as good as the cell phone company anymore, cable companies, but at the end of the day, if you can have some sort of a business where you have reoccurring people coming to them, like I have a friend that owns a franchise in chiropractor, and he's treating people. And yes, you have your people that don't need to come all the time, but then he's got his people that come all the time, and it's health-based. As you mentioned, it's about people feeling good about their lives. I don't know, this franchising worked really well. You kind of mentioned about vitamins and like maybe weight loss companies. Does that work well because of people are always wanting to lose weight? They're always wanting to get healthier. Have those been good franchise models as well?
They have, at least the ones we've worked with. I mean, there's a handful in that space that we partner with, and they've got the longevity behind them and the team and the model and everything. So I'm sure there's some players out there that don't do as good of a job, but no, that's definitely a hot area. And I don't like using the word hot, but again, I don't think it's going anywhere.
Yeah, I
And I
agree.
will say that's an area, it's got some changes. I mean, there are new drugs coming on the market, and I won't claim to be an expert on all things weight loss. So I think for people to get involved, they have to do their due diligence and understand what risks are there that something could change on the drug front that could negatively or positively impact the business. So a few more unknowns around that one.
Due diligence. So that was key of what you just said. Do due diligence. People that are listening or watching and you're interested, find somebody to communicate with. I don't know if you deal with people on an individual basis, but it doesn't matter whether you live in Canada or you live in the US, brothers and sisters of one another, and you can learn a lot. And there's complexity differences between regulations between one country to the other, but there's so many similarities. So do you get a lot of individuals that are contacting you, or are you more dealing with the upper end equity managers and people that have tons of cash?
Now our bread and butter is working with individuals, and
Awesome.
yeah, and our process is entirely free. I should have said this at the beginning of the show, but it's entirely free. We get a referral fee from a franchise brand when a placement happens,
Oh,
and
wow.
none of that gets passed on to our clients. So it's entirely free to work with us. And if you go out there and start Googling, you're going to see a lot of noise. Every franchise brand's putting their best foot forward, their marketing message. Even the top 50 list or top 100 list from different publications, oftentimes the companies are paying to be on that list. It's more of a PR move. So that's where we come in. We've got relationships in the industry. We kind of see what's going on behind the scenes. We know what's resonating with others with similar backgrounds, and so I bring all that together in a very concise way to say, all right, Dwight, they're in Edmonton. You've shared a little bit of information about yourself with me. If I were in your shoes, here are 10 or 12 opportunities that I would want to consider looking at across a number of different industries as a starting point, and we can always iterate off of that. But what I found is when you're looking at real opportunities and starting to have real conversations, that's when you start to crystallize in your mind, what are those characteristics that make sense for me in a business, things I like and don't like. And then, it gives us, like I said, a really good starting point to kind of iterate off of.
No, that's fantastic. So people that reach out to you, you certainly have the knowledge. I already knew that. I asked the questions so that you would answer it because I do research the people that are on my show quite extensively. I knew you'd be able to help out pretty much anybody. And getting to talk to you now today, this is the first time meeting you. Your personality is very calming and assertive at the same time. And I know people can't, I think that can't happen, but it's true. You can be assertive with your knowledge and your information that you're sharing, but still have that compassion and that assertiveness and that kindness all wrapped up into one. So I would highly recommend people reach out to you to discuss and talk about franchising, even if it's a no, even if it's no for now or no for never. Quit sitting back on the sidelines and wondering if you can own a business. How about you find out? Right? Quit living a life of fear, right? You talked about fear earlier, and that stops so many people. One of the things that you mentioned was we talked a little bit about the cost and investment. Traditional business, they spend a lot of money. They have leasing costs and et cetera that goes on with owning a franchise. Some franchises cost a few $100,000 to $1 million plus. I've seen them. And obviously you'd know more about those numbers than I would. But when a person buys a franchise and they're spending, what are they actually getting? Are all franchises the same? You're going to get a turnkey situation, or are you just getting, here's a manual, go find your location, do your marketing, or are the best franchises doing everything where you just go up, turn a key, walk in, and you've had your training? Obviously, you're going to get people coming in from corporate to train to how to do things right, to keep the image the same across all the franchise. What has been your experience in regards to franchising?
Yeah, I'll give just an experience I had last year when I opened my most recent franchise down in Delray, Florida. And it's a business that has custom orthotics, inserts for your shoes, and we sell some footwear as well. And so this was one that is retail based. A lot of our clients get into things that are service based where you don't have a customer facing retail location, but this is an example where you did. So I paid probably $50,000 when I signed the franchise agreement. That bought me the right to the franchise brand into that defined territory down there where no one else can open up within an X mile radius. They engaged, the franchisor had engaged a real estate firm in the area that knows the local area. They put together their top 8 sites that we could choose from. Granted, we could have gone beyond that if we wanted to, but I flew down there with a person from the franchise. We spent a full day visiting every one of the sites. We had follow-up conversations. They negotiated on our behalf. Ultimately, it was my choice which location, but they gave me all the information, all the facts, and their recommendations on which ones they would choose and how they would prioritize those. So, again, it was my call. I'm the business owner, but they highly supported and influenced, where I ultimately decided. After that, they handled the build out. I didn't have any hand at all in the build out other than, had to sign some checks, right? They handled the build out with, all the branding, the inventory, ordering, everything. And then they've done all the marketing since. This is one where it's a little more hands off than some. I've only been down there twice in the past year. And that's just to check in. One time I was down there for an hour and a half, and I came back certainly with feedback for the franchisor, and they jumped on it and made changes. But that's one where I've been very hands off. I'd say more hands off than most. But yeah, they should be the ones handling a lot of the digital marketing, because they can see marketing data sets from other locations and know how to optimize that. So we're spending our money wisely. Anything that I'm able to do from a grassroots standpoint, supporting the Little League baseball team or getting involved in the Chamber of Commerce, things like that, working my network, especially if it was here in Atlanta, that helps. Drives down your lead acquisition costs and stuff. But no, the franchisor should do the heavy lifting on that side. I'd say in most franchises, one of the heavy lifts that you'll have is the hiring piece. Now, they'll provide you with templates and recommended salary ranges, and you talk to other owners about where they found their best people for different roles. End of the day, that's typically your hire. No, a good franchisor is going to check a lot of boxes for you. And that's something you'll understand through the exploration process is what's on my plate, what's on their plate, and how do they support. And you want to make sure you're getting the support for the royalty that you're paying.
Of course. So that $50,000, that is buying the franchise rights, but then the expenses after the fact.
Yeah.
Right. What would a franchise, if you don't mind me asking, what would a franchise typically, before they start doing their first sale or their first service, what would it what have they been costing before they're actually starting to produce?
Yeah, certainly it's across the board, but I'd say that upfront franchise fee plus your startup cost, plus most franchises will build in about 3 months of working capital, assuming you're not profitable in the first couple of months in most cases. And so they build that in. It's the item 7 of the FDD, the franchise disclosure document, where they say, hey, here's what your all-in investment range looks like. I would say most of what our clients are getting into from an all-in investment range is, on the low end, maybe 150,000, to 400,000. Quite a few in that ballpark. Granted, I had clients buy multiple trampoline parks a few weeks ago at $3 million a pop. So,
holy.
Yeah, every now and then you'll have those outliers, but I would say, we do have some that are closer to 75,000 to 100,000, but the vast majority, I would say, are between that 150 and 400,000 ballpark from an all-in investment standpoint.
Thank you so much for sharing that, because I guarantee people are wondering, and then it gives them an idea what they need to come up with, right? What they need to secure in financing, or maybe it's a family that gets together and starts a franchise. I know that happens too.
Yeah, and it is very common to finance. I mean, obviously, banks prefer lending to franchises than startups, right? So, here in the States, SBA, and then Canada has some programs too. Lending is very, very common, and typically you'd be putting in maybe 15, 20%. So, say that 50,000, but then maybe your all-in investment was 200,000, but you're financing that other 150 piece.
That makes sense. So we don't have a lot of time, and I definitely want to talk about your book. You're the author of the book on non-food franchising. What was it like writing this book? Did you have anything along the way of writing this book that was like an epiphany of, wow, that is really good? I never give myself props for that, or give that person props for helping me get there. What was it like writing your book? And at the end of the day, what kind of person, obviously it's about non-food franchising. Is it a lighthearted book? Is it something that's all very analytical? Tell us more about your book, please, Jon.
Yeah, it's about 90 pages, very readable, and I try to pack as much content in. And most of my clients have read it by the time we get on the phone. So it has definitely done its job. We released it 2 years ago. Writing it was a labor of love, and life never slows down when you're taking on a project like that. So it meant waking up early before the kids were up on Saturday and Sunday mornings, just pounding out content, for a good 6 to 9 months. But so proud of it being out there. We give out free copies right and left. If any of your listeners want to come to our website, we'll gladly share a free downloadable copy with them. Certainly, if anybody wants to buy it on Amazon, all the profits go to Hope International, which is a great nonprofit that we support, that we really believe in. But no, it's been great just from an education standpoint and helping people fill in the gaps in their understanding of franchising, whether it be the financials, whether it be the industries, whether it be the expiration process, the FDD. We share some case studies of clients in there. Again, the goal is to get the juices flowing and increase that understanding so people can better understand if now's the time to explore on their own.
That's fantastic. I love the fact of, I could see the excitement in your face. For those that are watching, you'll understand. It was, Jon enjoyed writing a book, whether you had to get up on the weekends or not. Even writing my book, it was 5.5 months of smiles and crying, because it was more of, it's not really necessarily 100% business. It's like my podcast. It's the origin leading up to where I started my brand and my podcast, and just sharing those little things about my life. And I had these epiphanies, and it was going like, wow, I didn't realize that I actually accomplished that. I got to pat myself on the back. Right? Because we sometimes don't do that in our lives. And I'll pat you on the back from here virtually, because, that book sounds phenomenal. 90 pages of packed information to help others adjust their sales of life, right? It doesn't have to be complicated to want more. And it's okay to read Jon's book and go, you know what, this isn't for me. And it's even better though if you go, wow, I'm going to step outside of my comfort zone, because that's the only way that I can be successful in life, is not live within my comfort zone. And those that are in their comfort zone and like it, that's perfect. We're not here to judge you. But if you have that little spark inside your heart and your soul that says, hey, I want to do something, get a hold of Jon. Go to the website. I'll make sure it's in the show notes that you'll be able to access. Get that book, read it, reach out to him. It's never too late to give a heck about your life. It really isn't, right? It doesn't matter how old you are. One quick question. What would be your oldest person that you'd know age-wise that has started a franchise? Is there people in their older years that start them, or they're always in their younger years?
Yeah, I'd say it started on their own in their 60s. Wow. We have had clients in their 70s that do it in conjunction with an adult child, which is kind of neat when that happens. We had one gentleman, I believe, maybe early to mid 70s, and he and his 3 sons went in on it, and they were all keeping their day jobs. I think one of them was running point on it, but it's neat when you see that. But I've had guys as young as 24 years old too, and it's not right for every 24-year-old, probably not for most, but it is for certain ones. And this young guy just done great.
Well, that makes me glad to hear that stuff. So, Jon, if you had to give our listeners one last closing message, what would you tell them in regards to giving a heck and never giving up?
Yeah, I love what you said earlier about getting off the couch. And, what I found is there's never a perfect time to buy a business. There's timing where it's better than other timing, but end of the day, making a big change, stepping into business ownership, making a jump from what you're currently doing, giving a heck, there's never a perfect time. There will always be something you can point to as to why it's not the right time or an excuse. But I think end of the day, you owe it to yourself to at least get the ball in play, get off the couch, start exploring. When you start moving towards option A or option B, in my career, I found that's when option C comes along. So, get in motion and good things happen.
Oh, exactly. I completely agree. It's like the domino effect, right? Dominoes fall, they keep on falling. And that's the way it is. Once we activate our mind as to what we could have and potential of our lives, we live better. Our step is greater. We just live a more great life. So thanks for that message. Our time is up. I want to respect our listeners and your time. Before we end, can you please tell the listeners what's the best way they can reach you, Jon?
come out to my website, franbridgeconsulting.com, FRAN bridgeconsulting.com. Share your email address. We'll, and actually you can click on the website and get a free downloadable copy of the book, but we'll then reach out to you and send a calendar link. If you'd like to take a next step and jump on a call, we'd be happy to chat further about what we talked about today and, see if it could be a good fit for you.
Awesome. I appreciate that, Jon. Any other last final words you'd like to share before I wrap up the show?
No, I think it was all well said. Really enjoyed the conversation. Love the podcast. And there's never a perfect time to give a heck, but best time to start today, right?
Absolutely. It's never too late. So thanks so much for being on Give a Heck, Jon. I appreciate your time and sharing some of your experiences so that others too can learn. It is never too late to give a heck.
Thank you for taking time out of your day and listening to Give a Heck. If you find value, I'd appreciate you sharing with your friends and family so they too can learn how to live life on purpose, not by accident. So you do not miss the next episode, please subscribe on your favorite podcast platform and please also post a review. I look forward to reading your comments. This has been Dwight Heck. If you want to check out other podcast episodes or today's show notes, please check out my website, giveaheck.com. And until next time, together let us all strive to give a heck.